Hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are coming from this world. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. We are ready to take off, and we have a full flight. All the premium middle seats have been taken. This topic always evokes a lot of conversation. How do we mix and match traditional project management methods like PMBOK along with Lean and Agile? I'm sure we're going to have a great presentation and some very lively discussion today. Having said that, let's move on. This is the agenda for today's webinar. We'll do a quick set of introductions, a quick word about our company, which is Digité. Dr. Masa will present the topic of the day, which is boosting PMBOK-based project management with Lean and Agile. We'll have 10 to 15 minutes for question and answers, and we will do a 5-minute overview of an exciting tool we have called Swift Kanban at the end of the presentation. So some pointers for today's webinar. We'll be taking questions off the air. There's a lot of people, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. To the extent possible, we'll group all these questions and respond to them jointly. To ensure maximum coverage, we can answer most of the questions. Please limit your questions to one at a time. If there is any time at the end of the webinar, we'll allocate it to more questions to be answered. The webinar will be recorded, and it will be made available to everyone here in a day or two. I have the pleasure of introducing to you Dr. Masa Maeda, who is going to be the speaker for today's topic. And I'm your host, Ram Subramanian from Digité. A quick word about Dr. Masa. Many of you would know him. He's a very well-recognized figure in the Lean and Agile communities. He's the founder and principal consultant of Valley Innova Incorporated. He's a senior consultant with Qatar Consortium. He was the founder of the Bay Area Limited WIP Society, which is a very successful organization that has been functioning very well here in the Bay Area. And he's creator of a Lean Valley Innovation, which is a good methodology that a lot of people use to implement Lean and Agile methodologies in their organization. A quick overview of our company, Digité. We've been pioneering web-based solutions for managing complex projects using geographically distributed teams. We are headquartered in Cupertino, California, and we are neighbors to a very small company called Apple. We have 250,000 users in America, Europe and US, and Asia Pacific. We have products that cover Lean Kanban, Agile ALM, project portfolio management, and we also have integration product called SwiftSync that integrates all these products together to give you a single platform for lifecycle management. Swift Kanban is our flagship Lean Kanban product. We have a number of customers all across the world. Gives you a quick idea as to the logos of some of our customers. With this, let me hand this over to Masa for the very interesting presentation on PMBOK and Lean and Agile. It's all yours, Masa.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm going to start the presentation. So again, the title is Boosting the PMBOK-based Project Management with Lean and Agile. And I put underneath between parentheses serious LeAP. And this is because this has become actually the formal term for this particular topic. And it's actually the title of the book that will be published in just a few weeks from now. So I was already introduced. So I'm going to skip this. So let's get into topic. So if we look at the last edition of the PMBOK, which is the 5th edition, what we see is that thanks to the PMI ACP program, which is the Agile program carried by the PMI, there has already been some influence that has permeated from the Agile world into what is the PMBOK, and is reflected because the 5th edition has, for example, what is known as the knowledge areas. There's a new one that has to do with the stakeholders, and basically it was taken apart from another knowledge area that has existed for a long time. And this is great because we can see that there's benefit beginning to come from the Agile side to the to the traditional management side. Nonetheless, project manager still has to decide between one and the other path when it comes to managing a project. Either we go the agile way or we go the traditional way. And the traditional way could be because there's some customer requirement, because of governance, company's culture. There can be different reasons for this. So what this means is, oh my gosh, I want to be able to take advantage of some of these agile tools, methodologies, practices, etc. But I can't because I have no choice. I have to manage this in the traditional way. So basically, you have to choose between one and the other. That's the way things are being seen nowadays. But actually, there's not really the need to do that. There's a way in which we can actually do something different. There's a way in which we can close the gap between both of them. So by this, what I mean is, it's not a matter of saying we're going to create a bridge between the two of them, or we're going to do a mapping between one and the other, because that actually wouldn't work. The traditional management and agile management, they are very different natures. They tackle different problems, and it's not a great idea to try to do a one-on-one mapping. So this topic is not about that. This is about how can we actually take advantage of the elements of what comes from the agile world into great management, traditional great management, but still maintaining that traditional. So how do we do that? Well, basically there's a set of 7 elements that we came up. We realized that can be applied and as an result of my team and myself working with different customers in different countries for different industries, in which we have been involved even with transformations of entire PMOs for large companies. So we have to interact very continuously with people who work under those conditions. And what we realized is that while doing that for several years, or doing this, we were assembling the pieces of a puzzle that now we just have to put them together, that allows us to actually do this. So one important element is systems thinking. And I'm going to be very brief on all of this because of the time constraints. But basically, systems thinking allows us to really understand not only at a deeper level of detail what it is of concern, but also the environment and how everything interrelates and how one aspect affects the other. So I use the metaphor of a sound equalizer for this, because a sound equalizer has a set of dials, and each dial has to do with a range of frequencies. And basically, for us to be able to hear the music that we want to listen to in a really nice way, which is as close as possible as if the band were actually playing in front of us, we have to move those dials up and down to the level that is right for the sound to be just right. If we took all these dials, if we move them all the way up or all the way down or put them all in the middle, the sound will be just horrendous. It just wouldn't work, right? So what this means is that the interaction between the different dials and the frequencies and how we move them has to be in agreement with the kind of music that we're going to be listening to. And even when one song is playing, as a sound engineer, what he does is actually move the dials up and down as the song goes along, so that the sound is just right. So what this means is that we have to be continuously adjusting what we're doing with everything that has to do with that context. So if we extrapolate this from a sound equalizer to, say, instead of trying to equalize sound, we're trying to equalize a project, a company, a department, a team, or a person, then each one of these dials will be those different aspects that have to do with how to keep that balance. So if we look at this as a project, we could say that each dial is one step in the process, say for that project, or one stage for that project. And what we had to do is not put everything all the way up, all the way down, which typically what happens is everything all the way up. because what people want to do is try to keep people working at maximum capacity, resources also at maximum capacity, and what that does is give us a really bad economic outcome. So what we have to do is not focus on maximizing the capacity of people and making everything work at maximum in every sense. What we have to do is make them work at the right level such that the entire system gives us the best possible economic outcome. Lean thinking adds to this, so that this part of systems thinking will be, say, in agreement with what will be under lean thinking, improving everything. Lean thinking also tells us that we have to eliminate waste. So we need to figure out a way to eliminate waste and improve everything. And a good way to proceed about doing this is, let's first identify and eliminate some waste, and then let's begin improving things out. Of course, we're never going to eliminate all waste, but if we spend some time at first, eliminating waste is going to be a really good idea, because a lot of costs, a lot of negative financial impact comes from the waste that we have, and we have a lot more than we can imagine. At the same time, if we don't do that and we try to just start improving things out, we're going to try to also improve the waste, and that will be also a waste. Okay, so it's important to be careful about this. And then, well, lean thinking has many other more aspects to it, but that will be like the most basic aspect. And then we have Agile thinking, where this comes from the Agile Manifesto, and we have the 4 values. They have to do with communication and collaboration, with creating a product, with train variability, so being adaptive. Thus, Agile thinking brings all this into play, and of course with the objective of creating a working product. Canonically speaking, it will be working software, but if we just extrapolate that, it will be just a working product. So if we take that into account, and then we consider methodologies that we have, such as Kanban and Scrum. So Scrum helps us, organize the team, brings really good discipline, improves communication, and helps start delivering value based on time slots. So we have our time boxes that allows us to deliver value. And then with Kanban, what we do is we do continuous flow of value creation and delivery. So instead of being, say, by time boxes, it's just continuously flowing. But in addition to that, Kanban is actually a methodology that is not focused on managing how the value is created. Kanban is a methodology that focuses on improving the process that we already have. And this is a very important difference between the two. So that means that you don't have to select between Scrum and Kanban. You can have any kind of process in place and put Kanban on top of it. And actually, you can have Scrum in place and put Kanban on top of it to improve your Scrum practice itself. So Kanban is more versatile from that standpoint. Now, the last element that we have to consider is serious games. A lot of you might be familiar with innovation games. Innovation games is a subset of serious games, which were created by Luke Homan. What we do here is we talk about serious games because we're not limiting ourselves to just the games from Luke Homan. We're actually talking about a larger set. And this includes canvases, for example. This includes some games like the one you see here, which is the Lighthouse Diagram. This is a serious game that I designed that allows us to understand the state of a context. So it could be the state of the project, the state of a team, of an organization, etc. And it can help us identify patterns and generate a strategy to improve that context. So now we have systems thinking, lean thinking, agile thinking. We have lean agile methodologies, and we have serious games. Okay, so then comes the core of this conversation, which is serious LeAP, which is how do we apply all these into traditional project management. So what we have here is the context of the PMBOK, and those of you familiar with the PMBOK already identify that those 5 large circles are the PMBOK process groups. Now, there's these purple elements, and there's a lot of like black little tiny elements or artifacts in there. So let's start digging into detail. This large view of the whole framework shows us how information and how value flows throughout, and it's just exactly the way that it happens in real life. So there's nothing new in terms of the direction of the arrows here. Any project follows this kind of flow. Now, if we go, say, into the initiating process group, which is the way we will start, the PMBOK 5th edition has two knowledge areas, which is developing the charter and identifying stakeholders. Serious LeAP is very iconographic, so we use a lot of imagery here. So basically everything that is these purple icons, the square ones are the integration processes, the round ones are the rest of the processes. So it's a way to identify, and then they have their inputs, their outputs, and then what we consider the tools and techniques. What we are proposing is everything that is a blue on black icon. That's actually what this is about. So what we can see here is that, for example, there's an element outside the two purple elements outside the two knowledge areas, and then there's a bunch of them inside each one of them. So let's look at them in a little bit of detail. So if we focus on the one that is outside, what we have is this gymnast, who is like thinking. And basically this icon represents Systems-Lean-Agile thinking. So what this tells us is, throughout the entire activity that has to do with the project initiation, you are going to be applying all of these ways of thinking. It's very important for you to learn as much as you can about them, and it can be gradual, so it's okay, no problem. You know just the basics, you apply that, and as you increase your knowledge, you become more effective applying this. And then we have, for example, for the develop project charter, we have these other icons. And basically what this tells us is what to apply where to be able to then generate the output. So we have, for example, we have that box. That box represents a product box, which is an innovation game. And what this tells us is that you can use a product box to as a way to help you generate a statement of work, or to better understand the statement of work, but it can also be used at other points in the process, and we will see this as I continue with the conversation. The second icon represents models, and this could be the business model canvas. It can be the lean canvas or the innovation canvas. And basically what this tells us is you are going to apply the one that is right for your particular project. Okay. Of course, the business model canvas is the one that is most commonly used, because the lean canvas is more for startup environments, and the innovation canvas is more for projects that have to do with innovation, particularly with design. But you basically apply the one that is correct for your project. So here's an example of a product box, and the product box can be used at different levels. It can be for the entire product, or it can be more fine-grained. We actually have a customer for a company that is a life insurance company. They have product boxes even for features. So it's a very useful innovation game that can be applied at different levels. And we have different canvas. This is the template of the business model canvas. And then we have other elements. So we have, for example, something having to do with enterprise environmental factors, and another one for the organizational process assets. And basically what we have is the Lighthouse Diagram for the enterprise environmental factors, and then for the organizational process assets, we can use Kanban or Scrum. And why is this? Well, it is because the Lighthouse gives us context and allows us to understand that context. So in this case will be those environmental factors. And we can use, for example, Kanban. If we have projects that we used previously, we can actually take the knowledge and experience that we had with those projects, including the quantification that comes with Kanban, and apply them to better plan for this new project. And basically what ends up happening is that we have an output. The output, obviously, for this particular process is the charter itself. The charter, can be a number of pages long, contains a certain amount of information. And basically what we are proposing here is, hey, there's an alternative. The same way that you can use all these other elements to be able to more effectively understand your inputs and then create the charter in itself doesn't have to be, although it could be a document the same way you have been doing it so far, but the alternative is you can make a minimal document, probably a 1 to 2 pages long document that comes together with some of those artifacts that you created. And in this case, the artifacts that go well with the project charter will be the innovation games that you utilize, your Canvas, and your Lighthouse. So you have now a more effective document that is actually not just written text and probably some images or photos or graphs. It's actually dynamic artifacts that are going to mature throughout the project. And then you can actually mature that as you go along. So if we go and look at the identified stakeholders, for example, we have again the linear methodology, so it will be Kanban or Scrum. The big I represents retrospectives. So again, if you have previous experience with projects that can be applied here, then you can take the knowledge and the lessons learned from those projects that you gather through the retrospectives and apply them here. And then you can have, for example, well, that's an agenda for a retrospective. Or you can have other kinds of games applied. The icon at the very right, for example, represents personas. And personas is a great way to be able to better understand for whom the product or service is going to be created. And also has a big advantage, and it is that it generates empathy. So really the mental representation that you and your team will have as to how to create a solution is going to be much more effective, counting with a representation of personas. And then what happens is that your stakeholder register, instead of being just that list or that roster of these different stakeholders, you actually have information that is actually more complete and more useful, and that you can leverage later on as well. So what is really important about this is, with Serious LeAP, what you end up doing is you apply different elements that you have, from everything that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, and you start generating artifacts, and those artifacts can be leveraged later on. You start using them over and over again, and you're updating them. And basically what ends up happening is that you are going to be able to get more work done more effectively in less time with better quality, because all these artifacts are highly visual and can be utilized by everybody. So if we go, for example, to the second process group, which is planning, and it is becoming richer. Those of you familiar with the PMBOK are very well acquainted with this. There's actually, I think, it's a total of 47 processes on the latest edition of the PMBOK, so it's very, very rich. So if we look, for example, again here in the integration process, we again encourage to use the ways of thinking throughout the entire process. And if we look at the scope management planning, what we see is that now we can start using, for example, the buckets icon that you see there. Those buckets of 3 different sizes have to do with a prioritization. So you apply prioritization techniques to start identifying the scope. You can use the planning poker, for example, which will be the icon in the middle. And what is important about the planning poker is that you apply the planning poker not necessarily to do the estimation, but you use it for what the planning poker is really effective, which is the planning in itself. So you apply that tool to be able to more effectively conduct all of your planning discussions. And then you have again your Canvas and Kanban. And whether you want to use Kanban, Well, because you can actually have a Kanban board that allows you to conduct the way you are doing all your planning activities so that you don't miss anything. So these are in more detail. And this is an example of the business value prioritization using buckets, in which basically you have buckets of different sizes. You apply a value to them. The value can be short sizes, or it can be a numeric value. And then you have a criteria, like the one that is shown as an example there on the upper right corner, which is generates money, saves money, improves customer satisfaction, or has to do with governance. And basically what you will do is for each feature or each user story, if that's what you decide to use, then you, as a team, the stakeholders who are doing the prioritization, identify if that user story either generates money or saves money or so on. So let's say that it saves money. Then we will have to determine if it saves us a lot of money or very little money. So depending on where it is on the scale, we will put that user story inside the bucket it belongs to. And basically at the end of the day, we have this set of buckets in which we have everything prioritized based on how much they satisfy that criteria. Another way to do this is to have different sets of buckets, each one for each criteria. And then you can use this to make decisions, identify patterns, to figure out in which order you're going to do your implementation, etc. The cool thing about this way to prioritize is that it's based on value to the customer and based on value to the enterprise, business value. So this is actually a favorite for decision makers and leaders. Or you can use your planning poker as well, in which you can use the numbers to do also some estimation. Just beware of the limitations of the estimation aspect of the planning poker. Now, if we look, for example, at the executing, then again, we can identify right away, even though we have, you have seen these icons just for like 15 minutes, I think that you can already start identifying some of them. So you see on the integrating process, which is the square one in the middle, that again, we say you have to apply the ways of thinking all the time. And then we see that each one of these elements has it has its own different sets of tools and techniques that can be applied. So it's a very simple concept, yet very powerful. What I'm showing you here is actually a simplified version. The complete version is reflected on the book, obviously, because that treats the whole framework and gives details as to what to utilize where. Because, for example, let's say innovation games, there's over a dozen innovation games. So we give you recommendations as to which ones to apply where. So that's important. So in the case of, say, how to manage the communications. Well, a really good way to manage communications is if you have your canvas, for example, the business model canvas, it tells you who your key partners are, who your customers are, how you're going to communicate with them, what are the relationships between them, and you even have the financial structure for your project. So that's a one-shot visualization of a lot of information that is important to make sure that communication is happening efficiently amongst the different stakeholders through the right channels. And then you can have also, for example, again, a Kanban board, and the Kanban board is going to help with the communication because it's the one placeholder where everybody visualizes what everybody is doing. And you can also improve the flow through the weight limits that you generate, which is the amount of work that you allow to flow through each state of the process, as well as generate policies of behavior behind the different kinds of tasks that are going to be flowing through your Kanban board. So basically what this does is if you have a process and you want to not only visualize how the flow is happening, who is working on it, but you also want to improve that process in itself as the project goes along, then Kanban is a great way to do this. And the same thing to monitor and control communications. We can use for example, the Lighthouse Diagram as a way to indicate what is the state of the project or what is the state of the features at any given time. And the Lighthouse has this property in which what we do is there's a vertical semantics in which the lower down an element is it could be a user story, it could be a feature, whatever you decide to place on the Lighthouse. The lower down it is on the diagram, it means that it's not in very good shape. Yeah, and that could be a measure of quality. If the quality is not as we expect, then this feature is going to be visualized lower down on the Lighthouse diagram. If the quality is better, then it's going to be higher up on the diagram. So that is going to allow us to also visualize the level of quality, for example. And then we have the the closing process. So again, we can take advantage of what we have, and to be able to close the procurements, then we can have a Kanban board that allows us to see how the procurements are flowing. We can match that with our canvas, and then we can use retrospectives to determine whether or not we actually accomplished what we need to accomplish or not. And the same will happen to determine whether we can close the project or the phase for the entire project. So what is important is the following. If you look at this structure, I mean, it looks very complex at first sight, and actually the full version looks even more complex because some of these processes, so for example, let's say a process like this could contain other processes. So there could be like 3, 4, 5 embedded processes, each one of them having its own inputs, its tools and techniques, and its outputs. So at first glance, it looks like it's too complex, like it is too much. But in reality, it's not, because what we are doing is we identify a small set of tools and techniques that can be applied, and these tools and techniques, actually, I'm using the term just because I'm sticking to the terminology of the PMBOK, but it's not just tools and techniques, because it includes also the ways of thinking, it includes the methodologies and so on. So it's something richer. But in the end, is you have a small set of elements that are going to help you to do your work and much better, more easily throughout the project. And it's something that can be done not only by the project manager, but by everybody in the involved with the project, so basically all the stakeholders. And it's something that matures over time, it's something that can be leveraged, and basically it makes the project a lot more easier to handle. So what that means is basically that what we have is, as I said at the beginning, this is not a one-to-one mapping between one thing and the other. This really, what we identified is that we are just filling in the gap in between the two. So you can actually conduct your traditional, you can manage your project in a traditional way, but still making it more effective by applying these techniques. It is very simple, but at the same time it's amazingly powerful. We have applied this with different customers. We don't have one case in which everything has been applied, and that's fine, because actually this is a modular approach. And what this means is, of all this richness of what you can apply, you don't have to apply everything. You apply only what you can apply, what you know, what you're learning, and so on, or what for some reason is allowed. Let's say that because of some kind of governance, there are things that you could use but are not allowed to be used, that's fine. So even if it's only one of them, you can already get some benefit from this. It can be applied to different kinds of projects, not only to adaptive, which is the way that, for example, ACP recognizes the agile side of project management. This can be applied to adaptive, non-adaptive, technical, non-technical, monophase and multi-phase projects, so it's a lot more versatile. At the same time, it also allows us to realize that we can actually go beyond the boundaries that we commonly consider to be those for Lean and Agile. we can actually go beyond that. It also allows us to realize that serious games are very effective ways of getting the work done. It's actually a lot of fun to do it, so there's an extra advantage there. And this is not limited just to the PMBOK. Basically, any kind of traditional project management that you have in place, you can apply this. The PMBOK is an excellent showcase, to be able to demonstrate how this works, but it can be easily applied to other kinds of management. At the same time, well, I think it's obvious that it strengthens, what can be done with the PMBOK. A lot of people consider that the PMBOK is probably, headed to a dead end or whatever because of, these new kinds of these new ways of managing projects. However, the PMBOK has actually been very effective. Yes, everything has room for improvements, everything has limitations, but the PMBOK has been, effective, and there's a reason why it exists all over the planet and is still being used. So basically what we're doing is we're making it even stronger. This also makes it easier for Agilists to add value to traditional management. This is very important because we have encountered potential customers, or just people that we conversate, at conferences and other gatherings, who tell us horror stories about, people from the Agile world trying to come to an organization and being so strong into the Agile practice that not by choice, is not conscious, that they start alienating, like traditional project management people. It just somehow happens. And this is a way to help also Agilists bring the benefits of Agile into traditional management. And it increases the effectiveness also for project managers. But also, let's say there's a company that is curious about Agile or is interested in transitioning from the traditional management to Agile, or wants to be able to apply either one or the other depending on circumstances. This is going to make it easier for them to be able to do that. And then also, this is important, some of the properties of serious LeAP is that it promotes value generation and delivery. Traditional management typically puts a lot of emphasis on budget, on schedule, and even though value and quality are mentioned, is not really emphasized enough. And what we're doing here is helping bring into traditional management a stronger level of importance and attention to quality and value, and to realize that the other aspects are actually constraints that we need to manage effectively to be able to accomplish that delivery to customer. At the same time, because the linear methodologies are well known to be highly collaborative, and serious games even more so, then basically this whole proposal promotes communication and collaboration throughout all the stakeholders. It's modular, as I already explained it. It's highly flexible because, again, you apply it to the level that you can. They can be leveraged. They can be used over and over. They mature as the project matures. You can actually adapt some of these practices, some of these games, depending on the context. So, for example, I think that it will be very clear. If we use the planning poker the traditional way, then we are limiting ourselves. But if we use the planning poker to be able to do or to assist most of the planning processes of the PMBOK, all we have to do is decide on which unit of measure we're going to use and which scale we're going to use on the planning poker, by at the same time understanding that the most important aspect is the planning and not the estimation. It's an open end, and what this means is that as new techniques come and new methodologies are developed, serious LeAP will be adding that to its bag of tricks. It's applicable to different kinds of projects, and again, it boosts the transition to agility. So this is basically, it's I know that it's a lot of information, but what I want you to take, I will say the takeaways from this is, it's not a choice of one or the other. There's a way to actually take advantage of bringing benefits from the Lean Agile world into traditional management. B is not an everything or nothing. It's something that scales with you, grows with you. You apply what can be applied, and it's a very gentle transition. It makes it easier for people from both sides, from the Agile side and traditional side, to be able to work together, to understand and communicate using more, commonly agreeable language. And it just increases the marketability of both the people from the Agile world as well as the people from the traditional management environments. And of course, in the end, well, the highest benefit is to the companies that are doing this and to the customers who are going to get better products as a result of doing this. And this is the tentative cover of the book. And actually, if you look at that diagram on the cover, it actually looks slightly different from the one that's here. And that's because the one that's here on the cover is actually the more complete version that's in the book. But basically, this is it. I think I took just about 40 minutes, 45 minutes on the explanation. I'm going to do this just very quickly because I want you to have just the basic idea of what it is, and at the same time realize that if those of you who are already in the Lean and Agile environments, everything that you know, everything that you can learn is something that you can actually bring to the traditional side of things. And for people who are into the traditional side of management, I think this is great news because basically you can start learning things little by little. You can start with just one serious game. You can begin with just understanding the basics of Kanban or just the framework of Scrum and apply just within the confines of what is possible. So for example, with Scrum, it wouldn't be a matter of trying to manage the entire project using Scrum. What you can do is apply Scrum only in what has to do with the actual creation of value. The team that is actually building the product. Then you can apply that internally in that context, and that won't alter what's happening in terms of how everything else is being managed. It's just going to make more effective that particular activity. So it can be applied. Okay. So this is what I want you guys to see, and more than anything else, get you excited about it, invite you to start exploring, start learning about it. Systems-Lean is just a way to put everything together, but you can get started even without having to necessarily look at this more formally. Once the book is out, well then hopefully it will be more useful to you to be able to do it more easily. So that's what I have for you guys. Thank you so much. Hello.
Hey, hello, Masa.
Yes, hi.
Yeah. Hello, Ram. Can you go ahead with the follow-up?
Let's take questions, Nishant.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot for that, Masa. We actually have quite a few questions, but I'm not sure if we have enough time. Most of the basic doubts about the webinar was, well, how can PMBOK guidelines be interpreted as lean or agile? As in, if you actually follow PMBOK, does it not result in a sort of a big planning up front and reams of documents. So how do you actually, go ahead with this?
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. That's one of the topics of high debate between traditional and, management and linear management, which is, can we have those big requirements up front or not, and what are the benefits or the disadvantages of doing it? And I think that what we have to realize is that there is a middle ground. If you actually work on your your requirements, focusing on applying serious gains in general, there's nothing there that tells you that you cannot do it. Work on the full set of requirements up front. There's absolutely nothing that tells you that you cannot do that. There's actually really nothing in Lean and Agile that tells you that you cannot do it. What it tells you that it's not advisable. It will be better if you don't do it because, and then there comes all the arguments in favor of why not to do it. But I think that the most important aspect is this. Within the traditional environment, what needs to be acknowledged is it is absolutely impossible to really understand and know everything from day one. If we want to do that, it's going to take us forever. So we can go about satisfying the requirement of having the full set up front for as long as we acknowledge that we are going to do it just up to a certain level of detail that is good enough to understand everything else that is going to happen, and at the same time acknowledge that it is to the best interest of the success of the project to allow flexibility to update those requirements as we go along. Because in real life, that actually happens. So what we have to do is just acknowledge the reality of things. So yes, this means that in a traditional environment, there's going to be more emphasis and there's going to be more time dedicated to that activity compared to the way it will be done in a linear environment. But that doesn't, again, we're not trying to move everything from one side to the other. What we're trying to find is a way to benefit how we're doing traditional management. So if we can generate requirements, a full set of requirements up front in a much more effective way, utilizing, for example, the killing technique, utilizing our bucket value prioritization, and some other of these tools, then it's great because we are satisfying that requirement of having a full set up front without having to spend the same amount of time that we used to apply before. At the same time, I noticed that we don't have to go into full detail. We just have to have enough so that we know that we can move on to the next step, and then as we go along, we just fine grain and polish those requirements.
Okay. People also want to know if you could recommend some books for serious games, something that would deepen their knowledge in serious games.
Okay, well, there's plenty of books for that. So there is, I think, there is one book that actually has the title "Serious Games." Other books don't have that title per se, but for example, there's Luke Homan's Innovation Games. There is the visual. What are those books called? Visual. I don't remember, visual meetings, visual leaders, visual teams. Of course, the business model canvas model is also a pretty good one. There's a book called Game Storming. The author is Dave Gray, and some other books.
Okay.
This is something very new. So I will say that a good way to go through is learn the canvases, the business model canvas, innovation canvas, lean canvas, learn the innovation games, look at this Game Storming book, and then I'm trying to remember this other book. There's a book entitled Beyond Fun. And,
okay.
that the author is Drew Davidson.
Hey, just a note to all attendees, we'll send you a mail with the details of all Masa's answers. So in case you couldn't jot down the name of the books, right? Anything else, Masa? Because I think we're running out of time, so I'd like to switch over to Ram for a short demo of Swift Kanban.
Yeah. Well, so just yes. Okay. Sorry, there's nothing for to answer all the questions, but my best recommendation is this: relax, accept the way the world really works, and actually, even from the traditional management standpoint, the PMBOK itself is just a guide, okay? It doesn't tell you that you have to do things exactly one way and not another, or that you have to do everything. It tells you this is a set of recommendations. You have to apply what really is applicable to your context in the way that works in your context. So even traditional management is not rigid. I mean, so that idea I think is wrong. We have to understand that is more flexible than it seems to be. Okay? And and again, this is a way to fill in the gap between them.
Okay. So I'll hand you over to Ram, and Ram, if you could take over.
Hey, thank you, Nishant. Thank you, Masa. That was a great presentation. I'm going to spend 5 minutes very quickly showing you a good application we have called Swift Kanban. A lot of clients use it for managing projects that are distributed with teams all over various geographies. I'm going to spend 5 minutes just showing you what this product is. So you're seeing a board here. I have a team. This is modeled on a team that is doing development work, maintenance work, integration work, and analytics work. And when you do these different types of work, the type of process steps you need to go through is different. So what we have done is we have modeled the process steps individually here as various lanes. So here you see ready, develop, validate, and deploy is here. In the maintenance, you have ready, impact analysis, develop, validate. So it's one team's board. It's got multiple lanes, and each lane has got a different process appropriate to the type of work they do. And as you know, Kanban is all about visualization, about seeing things right and taking decisions without running through reports and things like that. So we have made it as visual as possible. So if you look at this board here, let me bring up the legend. The gray ones are issues, the yellow ones are user stories, the blue ones are impediments, and the pink ones are defects. So just looking at the board, you know what type of work you're actually doing. Further, we have the visualization here. So when you zoom up the board, you have better intuitions as well. See, at this level of zoom, you're able to see what type of work you're doing. As you see, there are a lot of defects that has been worked upon. There is enough user stories here. So at the highest level of zoom, gives you a very good intuition. For example, you see there are a number of items here blocked, which is a serious impediment for working, and it gives you the intuition that you need to do something about putting processes that prevent blocking of the cards once they are taken up in the board. So that is one. And if you look at the card per se, the card also tells you a whole lot of information here. It tells you what the card is about, what type of attribute you have, like fixed delivery date or standard class and things like that. It tells you the priority. You can actually scroll it down here. It tells you due date and things like that. It tells you who's working on it. If multiple people are working on it, you will see an icon like this, and it will also tell you who is actually working on the particular item here. It's got things like tasks you can assign to this particular card. You can say this task needs to be completed when the card is in this applicable queue. So there is a whole lot of ways in which you can create a quick process here. And apart from this, we have a lot of other ways in which you can visualize the board. For example, when you do planning, you want to look at, hey, what is due this week, what is due this month, and things like that. So we have a calendar view for it. As you see here, when I scroll, it actually picks up the particular card associated with the particular place where the mouse is there. I can also plan my deliveries. If I move it here, this system automatically moves the card's delivery date. So good way of planning using a calendar. Let me show you a couple of other things that we've done here. Let me scroll it up. We have an aging type of a thing. So one of the things that many of customers want is that I have put all this work on the board. Which of the work is being actively worked upon? Which of them has not been worked upon for some time? So we have like an aging view. You see that these are the active cards. The progressive graying tells you how long the card has been stuck on the board. The grayer it is, the longer no one has actually worked on it. Gives you a very good way in which you can visualize which cards are being actively worked upon. You have things like, so the first column here is the ready queue. The ready queue is all prioritized work, and we have a backlog which is like a parking lot where you have all the various types of work you need to do. You would plan from this work and then move the prioritized work to the board. So that is a very quick idea, high-level idea about the board. Let me show you some interesting metrics that actually come out of this board once you start using the board. We are a large user of our own product for development of this Swift Kanban solution. We use it extensively. We also have a distributed team, and I'm showing some of the data that has come out based on our use of Swift Kanban for development of Swift Kanban product. As you see here, this is the average lead times and cycle times. So when I mouse over here, it says the top red line is actually the cycle time. The work and the wait times are the green and blue lines, and it actually tells me currently, as of February, my cycle time is 6 days. My work time on the card is 2.14, and my wait time on each card is 3.86. As you can see there, I have scope for improvement by trying and reducing the wait time. This is an excellent chart that a lot of customers have given us very good feedback. This is analyzing your cycle time over a period of time. So I've taken a particular period of time and saying, hey, I want to analyze whether my cycle time is improving or becoming worse, and I want to find out which are the parts of the process that are improving, which are the parts of the process that are becoming longer. So this is my current cycle time. As you see, it has tremendously reduced from 2 periods before that. And I can see, and if I see this, this part of the development done queue here, I can actually I can click that, and you see that from 9.1, 8.25 increased to 11.4, and I've brought it down to 3.3 days. So you can actually see which parts of your process are getting improved, which parts of the process need improvement, and things like that very, very easily. Here is the cycle time distribution. Average gives you one dimension, but average also takes into account cards that are, have long lead times, short lead times, and things like that, and gives you an average. Whereas here, it gives you an intuition as to, what is the number of cards you get done in a certain period of time. As you see, my sweet spots seem to be these 1 and 2 days. That is where most of my card gets done. And if I were to make a commitment of an urgent variety, I can take this into consideration of making the commitment. And finally, I do have a process control chart. Gives you the mean, the -3 sigma, and the +3 sigma. As you see, our process is reasonably, the variance in our process is reasonably less. And you see most of the cards that are getting done are between the +3 sigma, -3 sigma control limit. There are these outliers. I can actually go to these outliers. I can click here, understand why they are. Do they have special cause, or they have general cause? If it's general cause, I want to talk about how to prevent such things happening in the future. And there are a number of other reports, like, for example, this is the throughput report. This talks about what is the throughput from the team. And again, I can do the throughput by, say, quarterly, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, bi-release, by iteration, and things like that. So it provides a whole lot of charts that help you understand whether you've been improving process, what you can actually do to improve process, and gives you a very visual way of managing your work. And along with this product, we have another product called SwiftSync. So most of our customers have deployed things like Jira, Quality Center, and some project management systems. We have out-of-the-box integration between Swift Kanban and any of these tools, and you can actually do a synchronization two-way between those tools and Swift Kanban and carry over with Swift Kanban. That is a very high-level overview of Swift Kanban. There is a 30-day trial version available for you. You can sign up and start using it. Thank you very much. So that brings us to the top of the hour, and thank you all for participating in this webinar. The recording of this webinar is going to be available to everyone here, and if you have questions that have not been answered, you will also get those answers of the questions by email. Thank you again for participating in the webinar. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.